an actress, Tisha Campbell. She was, I think her most famous role was Gina in the Martin television series in the 1990s. Her and her husband, Duane Martin, who is a comedian, actor, and real estate developer, they have filed for bankruptcy. They say they have $15 million in debt, and while they only have $313,000 in assets, and their debts include payments on a leased 2016 Range Rover, a 2016 Jeep Wrangler, and a 2014 Range Rover. Now their financial problems, I think, well, a lot of celebrities, you see them having financial problems, and I think these kind of problems are due to a lot of celebrities get into these problems because they spend too much money, they live above their means, and they don't have their income is not reliable. Okay, so you see this stuff happening with actors, singers, rappers, like 50 Cent, for example, entertainers, comedians, athletes. You see it with a lot of professional athletes as well. And I think the reason is basically a lot of these people want to portray a certain lifestyle. Once they feel they supposedly become successful, they want to live that lifestyles of the rich and famous, like that TV show in the 1980s, I think, or whenever it was on. They want to portray that lifestyle, even if they can't afford it, and their income. Because if a person is an actor or an athlete or something like that, or a musician, they make money. Sometimes they may make a lot of money, but they don't have the steady income. Like, say if a person has a professional job, they make a steady, more reliable income. They could predict, like if a person is a doctor or something, they could predict that they're going to get paid, they're going to make money the next day, next year, the year after that, because they have a reliable job where they go to work every day and make money all the time. Whereas these entertainers and athletes and people like that, they really don't know if they're going to make money. So if you have an entertainer, for example, or an actor, they don't know if they're going to get a big movie role or not. They don't know if they get a role, they don't know if they're going to be successful, or if the movie is going to be successful. They don't know if their career is going to take off or if it's not going to do well. They may be successful one year, and then after that they don't get any roles. A person could be the biggest actor in the world, the biggest action star, the biggest comedy actor, or the biggest romantic lead. One day, the next day, they can't find a role in a movie, and they're not making any money. And the same thing goes for entertainers or musicians or singers or rappers. A person could have a platinum record, sell the most records. They could go on tour all around the world, sell out tours. The next day, nobody wants to listen to their music. They can't sell any records, or nobody will come to their shows. That's what happened. You had people like Vanilla Ice. He was popular at 1 minute, then the next minute nobody wanted anything to do with him. You had MC Hammer, Milli Vanilli, even 50 Cent. 50 Cent, his album came out in 2002, I think. He was one of the biggest selling artists, biggest selling hip hop artists, or probably one of the biggest selling artists, period. And then after that, now 50 Cent is bankrupt. His albums are not going to sell if he put out an album today, it won't sell the way that his first album sold. So that's what happens to a lot of artists. They're popular 1 minute, the next minute they can't, they're not, nobody's buying their music anymore. They get dropped by their record label. Same thing, and the same, just like the actors. 1 minute a person could be the top actor, next minute they can't get a role. They're not making any money. And when it comes to athletes are their career trajectory is somewhat predictable, because basically professional athletes rely on their bodies, so they can only be successful or only be on top when they're not too old. They have to be like in a certain age range. That's where they could play, depending on the sport, depending on what position they play and so on, and depending on how well their body holds up. Some professional athletes could make it to the big leagues and then get an injury, and they won't even play they basically won't barely play at all, because they get an injury, it ends their career completely. But other athletes may play into their 40s, from their 20s into their 40s, but eventually they have to retire. Eventually they won't be able to play anymore. That's what happens to every single athlete. Eventually they're too old, they have too many injuries, and they can't play. And then when they're not playing anymore, they're not making money. So I'm not sure how long the average career is for different athletes. The average salary, according to Forbes, for the different leagues, for the NBA, average NBA player makes $5.15 million. The average Major League Baseball player makes $3.2 million. Average NHL hockey player makes $2.4 million. Average NFL player makes $1.9 million. So those are big salaries, but at the same time, the thing is, these people only make that money when they're playing, and they don't know how long they're gonna play. So let's say you take a guy who makes it to the NBA. He gets a salary of he makes $5 million in a year for a year playing in the NBA, and then after that his career ends in 1 year. Okay, so he gets that $5 million. A lot of these guys, when they get that money, they're gonna go out and try to spend it, or they're going to go and spend it. So he might go and buy a $2 million house, then he buys a $1 million house for his mother. That means he's down $3 million. He's down to $2 million now. Then he buys some cars. He spends $500,000 on cars. Then he has a girlfriend, or a wife or a fiance or something, and she likes to spend a lot of money and buy a lot of expensive things to show off that she has a rich NBA boyfriend. So she has to buy all the newest shoes, most expensive shoes and handbags and clothes, and she has to drive a nice car and all that stuff. That costs a lot of money. And she likes to eat at expensive restaurants and live that expensive lifestyle. So that's draining his money. Then he has his entourage. He'll probably have an entourage of people around him, and he has to spend money on them. He's feeding all of them. He has his family. He's giving them money. And then he has lawyers and all that stuff. He has to pay the lawyers and all these financial advisors and all these people who are kind of leeching off his money as well. And then he has to pay taxes. So in the end, out of $5 million, if the player plays 1 year and only makes $5 million, that money, if he's living a certain lifestyle and he has all these people around him who are draining his money, then that $5 million can disappear very quickly. And studies have shown that a lot of these professional athletes end up broke within a short time of them leaving the sport. So see, the thing about money is pretty simple. If you make more money than you spend, then you gain money. If you spend more money than you make, then you have coming in. If you spend more than you have coming in, then you're losing money. And it will likely lead to brokenness eventually, or bankruptcy. So if you make 2 cents a year and you spend 1 cent a year, you're gaining money over time. Even though it's not a lot of money, it's a tiny amount of money, but you're still gaining money. Whereas if you make $500 million a year and you spend $600 million a year, you're on the path towards bankruptcy. So that's why you see a lot of these rich people, or some of these rich people, going broke, because maybe they make a lot of money. Maybe they make $5 million. Maybe they made $5 million in a year, or $3 million, or $1 million in a year, or $2 million in a year. But because they spend so much and they're trying to live a certain lifestyle, like Tisha Campbell and Duane Martin, how they have those 2016 Range Rover and 2016 Jeep Wrangler and 2014 Range Rover, 2 Range Rovers and a Jeep Wrangler, and it has to be they had to get the latest model of those cars. They could have had one car, one cheap car, or 2 cheap cars, or whatever. But they probably felt like they wanted to live a certain lifestyle and show off a certain amount of material things, and that's what I think drives a lot of these people into bankruptcy, because they're trying to live that lifestyle. And even if you look at homes, for example, buying homes, if a person has a really big home, that can be a big drain of money, because if you have a big mansion, you have all this land around, you have to spend a lot of money on landscaping and maintenance. You have heating or air conditioning depending on the climate. And if you have a big house, you have to spend a lot of money on that. That'll take a lot of money in terms of spending money on energy. Then you have property taxes. So a lot of these people, and it's not just houses, but other things like cars. For example, cars are depreciating assets, and they cost money. And if you have a Jeep, those things are gas guzzlers, so you're spending a lot of money on gas as well. If you have you're leasing cars and stuff, you have to make payments. So if you're renting an expensive place, you have to pay rent. So a lot of these people put themselves into situations where they have to keep paying all this money. And if they're not constantly making money, then they're losing money. Like I said before, if you're spending more than you make, you're losing money. Even if you make a lot of money and you spend more, you're losing money. So a lot of these people, they try to live that luxurious lifestyle, or flaunt a certain lifestyle, and they end up just spending too much money, locking themselves into these money draining assets, getting themselves these money draining assets, like these oversized houses and these expensive cars and leasing cars and all that stuff. And they're just spending all their money and not making enough money. So if I got like $5 million, I think I wouldn't go out and buy a big mansion, an expensive car,